Hello. Tonight, we begin with the most fascinating fairy tale. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Lion and the Mouse, in the deep heart of a wide and ancient forest, where towering trees filtered the sunlight into trembling patterns upon the ground, there lived a lion whose power was known to every creature that breathed. His mane was thick and dark. His roar echoed across the plains, and his strength was such that even the boldest beasts kept their distance. When he walked, the earth itself seemed to yield beneath his paws. Confident in his dominance, he feared nothing and trusted no one. One afternoon, heavy with heat and silence, the lion stretched himself beneath a great spreading tree and fell into a deep, careless sleep. His breathing was slow, his eyes fully closed, and his massive body lay relaxed, for he believed himself utterly safe. Nearby, hidden among roots and fallen leaves, a mouse crept from its hole. The little creature was restless, darting about in search of crumbs, seeds, or anything that might serve as a meal. In its hurry and distraction, the mouse climbed over a knot in the tree roots and accidentally ran across the lion's mane, scampering over his face and whiskers. In an instant, the lion awoke. His eyes flew open, blazing with anger. With one swift movement, he slammed his great paw down, trapping the mouse beneath it. The mouse squeaked in terror, certain that its life was ending. The lion raised his paw slightly, claws extended, ready to crush the tiny creature without a second thought. To him, the mouse was nothing. Too small to matter, too weak to deserve attention, yet the mouse found its voice. Trembling, it begged for mercy, speaking with desperate sincerity. It admitted its fault, pleaded for its life, and promised that if the lion would only spare it, it would never forget such kindness. One day, it said, it would repay the favor, however impossible that might seem. At this, the lion laughed. A deep, rumbling sound filled with mockery. The idea that a creature so small could ever assist the king of beasts amused him greatly. Still, he felt no real anger, only momentary irritation. Entertained by the mouse's bold promise, he lifted his paw and allowed the tiny creature to escape. The mouse fled at once, disappearing into the undergrowth, its heart pounding with relief and gratitude. Time passed, and the lion soon forgot the incident entirely. But fate has a long memory. Days later, hunters entered the forest with ropes, stakes, and cruel intent. They tracked the lion carefully, and through cunning and patience, managed to ensnare him in a trap. Thick ropes bound his legs and body, pinning him helplessly to the ground. The lion struggled fiercely, roaring with rage and pain. But the more he fought, the tighter the ropes became. His strength, once unmatched, now served only to exhaust him. His mighty voice echoed through the forest, filled not with dominance, but with desperation. That roar reached familiar ears. The mouse, hearing the sound, recognized the voice of the lion who had spared its life. Drawn by gratitude and memory, it followed the sound until it found the lion bound and defeated. Without hesitation, the mouse set to work. With tiny teeth and tireless determination, it gnawed at the ropes, strand by strand. The task was long and difficult, but the mouse did not stop. At last, the rope snapped, and the lion was free. The lion rose, slowly, astonished. Looking down at the small creature before him, he understood a truth he had never considered. Greatness is not measured by size or strength alone. Even the smallest being can repay kindness, and mercy given is never truly wasted. The wolf and the lamb. One quiet morning, beside a clear and gentle stream, a young lamb wandered away from its flock. The grass was fresh, the water cool, and the lamb felt no fear, for it had never known cruelty. Its world was simple and honest, guided by instinct and innocence. Nearby, a wolf watched from the shadows. Hunger gnawed at him, sharp and relentless. He desired the lamb, but rather than attack openly, he sought to cloak his violence in the appearance of justice. He wished to convince himself and the lamb that his actions were justified. Approaching with a stern voice, the wolf accused the lamb of insulting him the year before. The lamb, startled but respectful, replied that this could not be so, as it had not yet been born at that time. Frustrated, the wolf tried again, accusing the lamb of feeding in his pasture. The lamb answered gently that it had not yet eaten grass at all. Each response was calm, truthful, and sincere. The wolf's patience wore thin. He accused the lamb of drinking from his well. Again, the lamb explained that it still lived only on its mother's milk. Every accusation collapsed under simple reason. Yet the wolf's hunger and cruelty cared nothing for truth. Snarling, he seized the lamb and devoured it, declaring that he would not go without food simply because his victim proved innocent. Thus it is that tyranny needs no truth, only power and desire. The Ass and the Grasshopper. In a sunny meadow, an ass grazed contentedly until he heard music drifting through the air. It was light, joyful, and effortless. The song of grasshoppers perched among the tall blades of grass. The sound enchanted him. Filled with envy, the ass wondered how such small creatures could produce such beautiful music. Believing that their voices must come from some secret diet, he asked them what they ate. They answered simply that they lived on dew. Without reflection or understanding, the ass decided to imitate them. Convinced that copying their habits would give him their gift, he refused all other food. Days passed. The ass grew weaker, thinner, and duller. His voice did not improve, and his strength faded. Still, he persisted, stubborn and misguided. At last, overcome by hunger, the ass collapsed and died, having sacrificed his own nature in pursuit of something he could never attain. So it is that blind imitation, without wisdom or self-knowledge, leads not to greatness, but to ruin. The Wolf and the Crane. A lean wolf once wandered far from his usual hunting grounds, driven by hunger and impatience. In his haste, he devoured his prey too quickly, tearing flesh from bone without care. In that reckless feast, a sharp fragment of bone lodged deep within his throat. At first, he snarled and pawed at his mouth, thinking brute force would solve the problem. But the pain only grew sharper, cutting into his breath. And soon, even his terrifying growl became a choked wheeze. Fear crept into the wolf's heart, for he knew that strength and fangs meant nothing if he could not breathe. In desperation, the wolf searched for help, though it humiliated him to do so. At last, he came upon a crane, tall and calm, standing by a quiet stream. Swallowing his pride as painfully as the bone in his throat, the wolf begged her assistance. He promised her a great reward, more food than she had ever seen, protection from danger, and his sworn gratitude if she would only place her long beak and slender neck into his jaws and draw out the bone. The crane hesitated. She knew the wolf's nature well. His hunger for domination, his sharp teeth, his contempt for the weak. Yet she also saw his suffering and believed, perhaps foolishly, that even a wolf might honor his word when faced with death. Gathering her courage, she carefully leaned forward, guiding her head into the dark cavern of his mouth. The wolf trembled with pain and impatience, but she worked with steady precision, reaching deep until at last she grasped the bone and pulled it free. The relief was immediate. The wolf inhaled deeply, shook his head, and felt his strength return at once. The pain vanished as if it had never existed. The crane stepped back and, with quiet dignity, asked for the reward that had been promised. At this, the wolf's eyes narrowed. His lips curled into a grin that revealed all his teeth, now free and deadly once more. He laughed, a low, mocking sound, and replied that she had already been paid in full. Was it not reward enough, he said, that she had been allowed to withdraw her head alive from between the jaws of a wolf? The crane stood silent, understanding too late the folly of trusting such a creature. She flew away unharmed, but empty-handed, wiser and saddened by the truth she had learned. Those who serve the wicked must expect no gratitude. Escape without harm is often the only payment they will ever receive. The father and his sons. There once lived a father whose household was filled with constant noise, not laughter, but arguments. His many sons were strong and capable, yet they were forever quarreling, each insisting on his own will, each suspicious of the others. Their disputes were small at first, but over time they grew bitter, turning brothers into rivals and filling the home with tension. The father spoke to them often. He warned them that division would weaken them, that enemies outside the family would take advantage of their constant strife. He pleaded with them to remember their shared blood and common future. Yet his words fell on deaf ears. Each son believed himself right, and none would yield. Seeing that advice alone would not change their hearts, the father resolved to teach them a lesson they would not forget. One day, he asked them to bring him a bundle of sticks. Curious but unconcerned, the sons obeyed. When they returned, the father took the tightly bound bundle and placed it into the hands of his eldest son, instructing him to break it. The son strained with all his strength, bending and twisting, but the bundle would not yield. One by one, the father passed the bundle to each son in turn. Each tried, each failed. Then the father untied the bundle and separated the sticks. He handed them out again, this time individually. Now the task was effortless. Each son snapped his stick in two with ease, some even laughing at how simple it had become. The father gathered them close and spoke calmly, but with great seriousness. He explained that as long as they stood together, united in purpose and support, they would be like the bound bundle, strong, resilient, and impossible to break. But if they continued to quarrel and divide themselves, they would be as weak as the single sticks, easily shattered by the smallest force. The sons stood in silence, the truth of the lesson settling into their minds. For the first time, they understood that unity was not a burden, but a shield. Strength is born from harmony. Those who stand together endure. Those who divide themselves invite destruction. The Bat and the Weasels. A bat, careless and distracted during his nightly flight, once tumbled from the sky and fell helplessly to the ground. Before he could recover, he was seized by a weasel. Seeing death close at hand, the bat pleaded for his life, arguing desperately that he meant no harm and wished only to live. The weasel sneered and declared that he could show no mercy, for he was sworn enemy to all birds. Hearing this, the bat quickly adjusted his plea. He insisted that he was no bird at all, but a mouse, one who merely flew. The weasel, reconsidering, loosened his grip and allowed the bat to go free. Not long after, fate tested the bat again. He fell once more to the ground and was captured by another weasel. Once again, he begged for mercy, but this weasel responded differently. He proclaimed that mice were his most hated prey and that the bat would surely be eaten. Without hesitation, the bat altered his claim. He declared that he was not a mouse, but a bat, something entirely different. Confused and uncertain, the weasel hesitated, and in that moment of doubt, the bat escaped a second time. From these narrow escapes, the bat learned a vital truth. Survival often depends not on strength, but on adaptability. Those who can read their circumstances and respond wisely may yet find a path to safety. Wisdom lies in knowing how to turn changing conditions to one's advantage. The Cock and the Jewel. At dawn, when the yard was still quiet and the light lay thin upon the ground, a cock went about his daily task. He scratched the earth patiently, turning over dust, straw, and small stones, seeking food for himself and the hens that depended on him. His life was governed by simple needs: hunger, vigilance, and the steady rhythm of survival. Every movement of his claws had a purpose, and every glance of his eye searched for nourishment. As he worked, something hard resisted his beak. Clearing away the dirt, he uncovered a jewel, smooth, polished, and radiant, catching the early sun in flashes of color. It was unlike anything the cock had ever found before. He paused, tilting his head, examining it with a mixture of curiosity and understanding. Though he did not desire it, he sensed that it was rare and prized among creatures who valued such things. Speaking aloud, the cock reflected that if the jewel's rightful owner had discovered it, it would have been lifted reverently, restored to its former place, and admired for its beauty. In such hands, it would have meaning and honor. But to him, it was nothing more than a useless stone. It could not be eaten, could not feed his hens, and could not sustain life. Its brilliance did nothing to quiet hunger. The cock thought instead of barley corns, plain, dull, easily overlooked, yet capable of preserving life itself. Compared to that simple grain, the jewel held no worth at all. Leaving it where it lay, he returned to his scratching, convinced that value is not absolute, but measured by need. What dazzles one creature may be worthless to another, and true riches are those that serve life, not vanity. The swallow and the crow. One day, as the seasons stood on the edge of change, the swallow and the crow found themselves perched upon the same bare branch. The swallow, newly returned with the warmth, admired her sleek wings and shining feathers, which shimmered in the sunlight. Proud of her grace and speed, she spoke of beauty as though it were proof of merit, praising the charm of spring skies and gentle winds. She mocked the crow for his dark, coarse plumage, calling it dull and joyless, unfit for admiration. To her, elegance was everything, and the world seemed designed for those who thrived in fair weather. Eric, the crow, listened, without anger. When the swallow had finished, he replied quietly. He did not deny her beauty, nor the pleasure of warm days. Instead, he spoke of winter, of cold nights, bitter winds, and barren fields. He explained that while her feathers delighted the eye in spring, they offered little defense when frost ruled the land. His own heavy coat, though lacking beauty, shielded him through storms and scarcity. The crow ended the dispute with a simple truth. Endurance matters more than appearance, and loyalty, revealed only in comfort, is easily lost. Those who share joy but flee hardship are friends in name alone. When winter comes, beauty fades, but protection and constancy remain. Thus it is with friends, as with feathers. Fair weather companions are not worth much. The kingdom of the lion. In a time when beasts still gathered beneath open skies to decide their fate, the animals of the field and forest chose a lion as their king. Though mighty in strength, he ruled with restraint. He was neither cruel nor quick to anger, and his authority rested on justice rather than fear. Under his reign, order prevailed, and many believed peace had found its firmest guardian. After many seasons, the lion summoned all creatures, great and small, predator and prey, to a grand assembly. Standing before them, he proclaimed a universal league, a binding law of peace. Old enmities were to be forgotten. The wolf would dwell beside the lamb, the panther beside the kid, the tiger beside the stag, and the dog beside the hare. No violence would be permitted. All were to live in harmony under the law of the crown. The gathering was filled with awe and uncertainty. For the strong, the decree demanded restraint. For the weak, it offered hope beyond memory. The hare, trembling yet bold enough to speak, declared that he had long dreamed of such a day, one in which the powerless could stand unafraid beside the powerful, secure in justice rather than speed. But hope struggled against instinct. The moment the words were spoken, the weight of generations pressed upon him. Promises could not erase fear carved by teeth and pursuit. Before the assembly could dissolve, the hare fled, running as he always had, trusting his legs more than royal words. Thus the kingdom learned that laws may command behavior, but nature and memory obey more slowly. Peace declared is not peace achieved, and even the wisest rule cannot instantly unteach fear born of long suffering. The traveler and his dog. At the first light of morning, when the road lay quiet and the air still held the chill of night, a traveler stood ready to depart on a long journey. His cloak was fastened, his provisions were packed, and his walking staff rested firmly in his hand. Every outward sign suggested that he was prepared to leave at once, eager to set his feet upon the path ahead and put distance between himself and his home. At the doorway, however, his dog lingered. The animal stretched slowly, extending each limb in turn, arching his back and opening his jaws in a wide, lingering yawn. He seemed entirely untroubled by the urgency of travel, as though the morning existed only for comfort and calm rather than motion. Seeing this, the traveler grew impatient. His mind, already racing ahead to destinations unseen, mistook stillness for delay. He turned sharply toward the dog and scolded him. "Why do you stand there idling and gaping?" he demanded. "Everything is prepared, and yet you delay us. The road waits for no one. Come along at once, or you will be the cause of our lateness." The dog rose without haste, his tail wagging gently, his expression calm and attentive. He looked at his master with quiet intelligence and replied in an even tone. "My master," he said, "I am fully ready. My strength is awake, my senses are alert, and my loyalty has never slept. I have been waiting here all this time, not because I am unprepared, but because you yourself have not yet truly begun." The traveler stood silent, realizing that while he accused another of delay, It was his own restless hesitation that had kept him rooted in place. And so it is often that those who complain the loudest about slowness are themselves the ones who linger longest. The ants and the grasshopper, throughout the warmth and abundance of summer, when the fields shimmered beneath the sun and food lay scattered in generous supply, the ants worked without pause. Day after day, they gathered grain from the earth, carrying each kernel with patient determination. They stored their harvest carefully, drying it, sorting it, and guarding it against waste. Their labor was quiet and unremarkable, yet guided by foresight and to discipline. While the ants toiled, a grasshopper passed his days in a very different manner. He leapt freely among the grasses, lifted his voice in song, and delighted in the ease of the moment. The sun was warm, the nights were gentle, and the idea of scarcity seemed distant and unreal. To him, the present hour was all that mattered. When winter arrived, the land grew hard and silent. Snow covered the ground, and hunger crept into every corner of the cold air. One bleak day, the grasshopper, weakened by famine, stumbled upon the ants as they brought out their stores to dry them. Trembling, he begged them for a small portion of food, just enough to preserve his life. The ants listened and asked him why he had made no provision during the long summer months, when food was plentiful and effort light. With a weary sigh, the grasshopper answered truthfully. "I had no time," he said. "My days were spent in song, and I thought the season would never end." The ants replied without cruelty, but without indulgence. "If you chose music over preparation when the days were bright," they said, "then you must endure the silence of hunger when winter comes." And they returned to their work, leaving the grasshopper to learn that pleasure without foresight leads to hardship when circumstances change. The Hare and the Tortoise. One day, in a green clearing beneath the open sky, a hare amused himself by mocking a tortoise. He laughed at her short legs, her heavy shell, and her slow, deliberate movements. Proud of his own speed, he darted back and forth, boasting that no creature alive could rival him in a race. The tortoise listened calmly, neither angered nor discouraged. At last, she replied with quiet confidence. "Though you are swift," she said, "I believe I could defeat you in a race." The hare burst into laughter, finding the suggestion absurd. Yet, amused by the challenge and certain of his victory, he agreed. To ensure fairness, the fox was chosen to lay out the course and mark the finish. On the appointed day, the race began. The hare surged ahead at once, covering great distances in moments, while the tortoise moved forward at a steady, unbroken pace. Seeing how far he had advanced, the hare grew careless. Confident that victory was assured, he lay down beside the road to rest, believing he could easily make up the distance later. Sleep overtook him quickly. Meanwhile, the tortoise continued onward, never stopping, never doubting, step after patient step. When the hare finally awoke and ran with all his speed, the race was already decided. The tortoise had reached the goal and rested peacefully, her effort complete. Thus, it was proven that perseverance and consistency often succeed where pride and haste fail, and that steady progress, however slow, leads more surely to triumph than careless speed. The charcoal burner and the fuller. A charcoal burner lived and worked within the walls of his own house, where the air was always faintly darkened by soot, and the smell of burned wood lingered like a permanent shadow. His trade demanded fire, smoke, and black dust, and these followed him everywhere, on his clothes, his hands, even in the lines of his face. One day, while conducting his business in the market, he encountered an old acquaintance, a fuller, whose life and labor were of an entirely different kind. The fuller earned his living by cleansing cloth, whitening it, and restoring to fabrics the brightness that time and use had taken away. His hands were accustomed to water, soap, and careful scrubbing, and his house was known for its cleanliness and order. The charcoal burner, pleased to meet a familiar face, spoke warmly and proposed an idea that seemed to him both practical and friendly. He urged the fuller to come and live with him, suggesting that they would enjoy closer companionship and that by sharing one household, they could reduce expenses and support one another. He spoke of shared meals, divided costs, and the comfort of having a trusted neighbor under the same roof. In his mind, friendship and convenience were reason enough to overcome any small difficulty. The fuller listened patiently, weighing the offer with care rather than enthusiasm. At last, he replied calmly but firmly that such an arrangement could never succeed. Their trades, he explained, were too opposed to be reconciled under one roof. Whatever he labored to cleanse and make white, the charcoal burner would inevitably soil again with smoke and black dust. What one man worked to remove, the other worked daily to create. To live together would be to undo each other's efforts at every turn, turning cooperation into constant conflict. Thus, the fuller declined the offer, not out of unkindness, but out of clear understanding. He knew that harmony requires more than goodwill. It requires compatibility. When pursuits, habits, or principles are fundamentally opposed, closeness only magnifies discord, rather than reducing it. Like naturally seeks like, and what is unlike will always struggle to remain together. The Boy Hunting Locusts. A young boy once went out into the fields with the simple intention of hunting locusts. It was a common task, done both for sport and for usefulness, and the boy approached it with energy and confidence. The ground was warm beneath his feet. The grass stirred lightly in the breeze, and the air was alive with the sudden leaps and clicks of the insects he pursued. Before long, his efforts were rewarded, and he had gathered a respectable number of locusts, each one caught by quick eyes and quicker hands. As he moved through the field, alert for more, he noticed another small creature nearby. It was dark in color and still upon the ground, and at a careless glance, it resembled the very insects he had been collecting. Without hesitation, the boy reached out his hand, eager to add another prize to his catch. In his haste, he did not pause to examine the creature closely or to question whether all that looks familiar truly is harmless. The creature, however, was not a locust, but a scorpion. As the boy's hand came near, the scorpion raised its tail and revealed its sharp sting, glinting with danger. In a voice that carried both warning and irony, it spoke to the boy, telling him that had he touched it, he would not only have lost the scorpion, but all the locusts he had already captured as well. Pain and panic would have scattered his gains. In an instant, the boy withdrew his hand, startled and suddenly aware of how close he had come to harm. In that moment, he learned that appearances can deceive, and that careless judgment can turn success into loss. What seems small or familiar may hide danger, and wisdom lies in discernment, not haste. The Fisherman Piping. A fisherman who possessed not only skill with nets, but also talent in music, once went down to the seashore at dawn. Slung over his shoulder were his fishing nets, worn but reliable. And in his hand he carried a flute, polished smooth by years of use. The sea lay calm before him, its surface broken only by gentle ripples and the distant cry of seabirds. Choosing a rock that jutted out over the water, he climbed upon it and surveyed the depths below, believing that music could charm even the creatures of the sea. He lifted his flute and began to play. The notes floated out across the water, light and inviting, changing from tune to tune as he tried to entice the fish. He imagined them rising from the depths, drawn by the melody, and willingly swimming into the net he had set beneath the rock. He waited with confidence, then with patience, and finally with growing doubt. The sea remained indifferent, and no fish appeared. After a long while, he accepted that his music alone would not feed him. Setting aside the flute, he picked up his nets and cast them properly into the water, relying on skill and effort rather than charm. This time, the sea responded. When he drew the nets back in, they were heavy with fish, writhing and leaping as he hauled them onto the rock. Looking down at his catch, the fisherman laughed and spoke to the fish, remarking on their strange behavior. When he had played music, they would not dance to his tune. But now, when the music was silent and they were trapped, they leapt about eagerly. In this, he recognized a familiar truth. Many refuse to act when invited gently, yet respond only when compelled by necessity. The Dog and the Shadow. A hungry dog was making his way home at the end of a long day, his jaws clenched proudly around a solid piece of flesh he had claimed after much effort. He trotted with confidence, ears alert, tail lifted, savoring in advance the pleasure of eating his prize in peace. To reach his resting place, he had to cross a narrow wooden bridge that arched over a clear, gently moving stream. The water below reflected the sky, the trees, and everything that passed above it like a living mirror. As the dog stepped onto the bridge and glanced downward, he caught sight of another dog beneath him. This dog looked remarkably like himself, but what drew his full attention was the prize the other seemed to carry. A piece of meat far larger and more tempting than his own. In that instant, desire drowned out caution. The dog did not pause to question how another animal could be so perfectly aligned with his movements, nor why it appeared only in the water. Greed seized his mind completely, convinced that fortune had placed an even greater reward within reach. He snarled and lunged at the reflection, opening his mouth to seize the larger piece. At that very moment, his own meat slipped from his jaws and fell into the stream. The water closed over it and carried it away, just as the imagined prize vanished with a ripple. The dog snapped at nothing but air and stared in disbelief at the empty water below. Only then did he understand his folly. What he had attacked was no rival, and what he had desired was no real gain. By reaching for what did not exist, he had lost what he truly possessed. Ashamed and still hungry, the dog left the bridge empty-mouthed, having learned too late that greed can turn a certain reward into total loss. Hercules and the Wagoner. A wagoner was guiding his heavily loaded cart along a narrow country road after a night of rain. The ground was soft and uneven, and deep ruts scarred the path from the passage of earlier wagons. As he urged his oxen forward, one of the wheels slipped into a rut so deep that the cart came to a sudden stop. No matter how the animals strained, the wheel sank further into the mud, and the load would not move. The wagoner climbed down and stood staring at the cart, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides. Instead of attempting to lighten the load, push the wheel, or encourage the oxen with renewed effort, he lifted his eyes to the sky and began to cry out loudly for Hercules, whom he regarded as the great helper of mankind. He shouted prayers and complaints, calling upon the hero to come down at once and rescue him from his trouble. After a time, Hercules appeared before him, not with thunder or fury, but with a stern and practical expression. He listened to the wagoner's cries and then spoke plainly. "Why do you stand there, calling upon me?" he said, "when your hands and strength are idle? Put your shoulder to the wheel. Drive your oxen forward. Remove the stones and mud that block the way. Use every effort that lies within your power." Hercules continued, "Do not expect the gods to do for you what you refuse to attempt yourself. Help does not come to those who merely complain, but to those who act. When you have done all you can, then, and only then, may you ask for aid." With that, he vanished. Shaken and ashamed, the wagoner followed the advice. He pushed, guided the oxen, and cleared the rut. Before long, the wheel rose free, and the cart moved forward once more. From that day on, the wagoner remembered that the strongest help begins with one's own effort, and that reliance without action leads only to disappointment. The Mole and His Mother. A young mole, blind from the moment of his birth, lived beneath the earth with his mother, tunneling through the dark soil as generations of his kind had always done. Though he had never seen light or color, he grew restless and proud. And one day, he announced with great confidence, "Mother, I am certain that I can see." His mother, who knew well the nature of her son and the limits he was born with, did not scold him or argue at once. Instead, she decided to let experience correct his mistake. Calmly, she placed a few grains of frankincense before him, their scent strong and unmistakable to any creature with a healthy sense of smell. Then she asked gently, "Tell me, my son, what is this that lies before you?" The young mole bent his head toward the grains and considered carefully. Trusting his imagination more than his senses, he replied with confidence, "It is a small pebble." He spoke as though the matter were settled, pleased with himself for having given an answer. His mother sighed, not in anger, but in sadness. "My poor child," she said, "I fear that you suffer from more than blindness, for if your senses were true, you would know by scent alone that this is no stone. It seems that in claiming a power you do not possess, you have also ignored the ones you do. The mole was silent, and for the first time began to doubt his certainty. From that day forward, he learned to be more cautious about his claims and to respect the limits of his nature, understanding that false confidence can blind the mind more surely than darkness blinds the eyes. The Herdsman and the Lost Bull in the deep shade of an ancient forest where tall oaks whispered with the wind and narrow paths twisted like secrets through the undergrowth, there lived a herdsman whose days were spent tending his modest herd. He knew each animal by its step and sound, and every dawn he counted them carefully, for in the wild places of the forest, loss could come silently. One morning, as the mist still clung to the ground, he discovered that a young bull calf was missing from the fold. The earth showed no clear track, and the trees stood indifferent, as if they had swallowed the truth. Troubled in spirit, the herdsman searched from sunrise to sunset. He pushed through thorny thickets, called out into shadowed glades, and peered into ravines where fallen leaves lay thick and undisturbed. Yet the calf was nowhere to be found. Weariness settled into his bones, and fear followed close behind, for the forest was known not only for thieves, but for beasts far more dangerous. At last, standing beneath a spreading pine, he lifted his voice in a solemn vow. If only the thief might be revealed to him, he promised to offer a spotless lamb in sacrifice to Hermes, to Pan, and to the unseen guardian spirits believed to watch over the forest paths. Not long after, driven by a restless hope, the herdsman climbed a small hillock overlooking a clearing. As he reached its crest and looked down, his heart froze within him. There, at the foot of the hill, lay the truth he had sought. A mighty lion, golden-maned and terrible, crouched over the remains of the lost calf, feeding calmly, as if no vow had been spoken, and no human grief mattered. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. Terror seized the herdsman. His knees weakened, and his breath caught in his throat. Raising his hands toward the sky, his voice shook as he spoke again to the gods. "A moment ago," he cried, "I vowed a lamb if I might learn who had robbed me. Now I see the thief with my own eyes. If only I may escape alive from this place, I will gladly add a full-grown bull to the offering, and count the loss of the calf as nothing." With that prayer trembling on his lips, he backed away, careful not to draw the lion's gaze, and fled the forest with a new understanding of the price of knowledge. The Fawn and His Mother. In a quiet meadow at the forest's edge, where sunlight filtered softly through young leaves. A fawn grazed beside his mother. His legs were slender but swift, and his eyes shone with youthful confidence. Watching his mother pause at every distant sound, he spoke with innocent puzzlement. "Mother," he said, "you are taller and stronger than any dog. You run faster than they do, and you carry sharp horns upon your head. Why then do the hounds frighten you so?" The mother deer lowered her head and regarded her son with gentle sadness. She knew the pride of youth, and the way reason often speaks louder than experience in a young heart. With a faint smile, she answered him slowly. "All that you say is true, my child. I know my strength, my speed, and the weapons nature has given me. Yet when the sound of a single dog's bark reaches my ears, my heart forgets these things. Fear rises before thought, and my legs carry me away before courage can speak." She led him deeper into the grass, where the wind carried distant echoes of the hunt. "There are battles," she continued, "that are lost not for lack of power, but for lack of a steady heart. What the mind understands does not always command the blood. Remember this, and be patient with both yourself and others." The fawn listened, quieter now, sensing that some lessons cannot be learned by words alone, but only by time. No arguments will give courage to the coward. Words may shine like polished armor, and reasons may stand firm as stone. Yet courage does not grow from argument alone. Fear lives deeper than thought, rooted in instinct and memory. Until the heart itself is ready to change, no logic, however perfect, can teach it to stand fast.